Britain facilitated the massacre of up to 3 million people in Nigeria in the 1960s, and there are people alive today who remember its impact.
How can you forget a massacre? How can you be alive during the time of a bloody genocide, survive it, and forget? No.
American professor Uju Anya was born in Nigeria, and her family survived a war that was sponsored by the British Empire.
Queen Elizabeth II, before she died, never once openly acknowledged what her government did on her behalf, in her name, to prop up her crown and to pad her coffers and her royal treasury, and never once said sorry.
Dr. Anya was born in 1976 in the aftermath of this war.
So what I saw was kind of the bombed out buildings and the reconstruction projects, and of course the conversations around the dinner table. My mom was pregnant during this war and running from village to village to escape the massacre.
Like so many conflicts, the roots of this war can be traced back to colonial rule. In 1914, the British Empire forcibly merged 400 different ethnic groups and tribes to create its largest colony at the time, Nigeria. Take a look at this news report during the Queen's royal tour in the 1950s.
These and many others marched slowly past the royal pavilion in salute to the Queen. Never before had such a magnificently comprehensive tribute been witnessed in Nigeria.
Even after Nigeria gained independence in 1960, there were still people who felt they didn't want to be a part of this newly formed country. This desire to create the breakaway state of Biafra would set off a civil war that lasted nearly 3 years.
Fight on, brave boys, fight on, heroes of our fatherland. Pursue the enemy, harass him, destroy the invader.
In response, the Nigerian government imposed a blockade on Biafra, which cut off all food supplies to the area. In living rooms across the world, people watched news clips of children with bloated bellies and sunken eyes.
3 million civilians were massacred, and they were done so using guns and bombs and supplies provided by the British government, at which Queen Elizabeth II was head.
You see, Britain had a stake in this. It backed the Nigerian government because it wanted to protect the oil investments that happened to be in Biafra's territory. This brutal legacy is another reason why the British monarchy and the Queen in particular have become symbols for many black and brown people around the world of colonial oppression.
These are not just statues, these are not just figureheads, these are direct beneficiaries of centuries of abuse. Human enslavement, exploitation, extraction of natural resources, political destruction and devastation, and till today, continued meddling in African affairs. Listen to us, read and learn, and join us when we ask the British government to recognize what they did to aid and support the Biafra genocide.
The Commonwealth. Everybody's talking about the British Commonwealth, but the last time I checked, there was nothing common about the wealth. My forefathers got the crumbs, and the British, they took all the wealth. While Africans were asleep, they invaded by stealth. With feigned treaties, they divided ill-gotten wealth, and my forefathers who resisted had backs that were filled with welts. Everybody's talking about the British Commonwealth. But the last time I checked, there was nothing common about the wealth. Gone. All gone. Why won't God kill me? Softened. Screams of a mother whose 7 children were auctioned. Beaten and killed, often buried without coffins, and a life of misery to be lived by their orphans. For hundreds of years, this was how they made their fortunes, and we toiled as we boiled, as we picked all their cottons. The British empires of vampires weren't built with white hands, but by people of color from far away lands. They bombed and they burned and they killed with impunity. They still possess our gold and diamonds, and we haven't gotten an apology. They have hundreds of mansions and tens of billions, and yet their ears have been deafened to our cries of reparations. Now, there's a change on the throne because the Queen has passed. And next to her coffin stood the Westminster cross. The commentator said it was made of crushed gold and sapphires, but all I heard was crushed souls and sufferers. Still, everybody's talking about the British Commonwealth. Yet, the last time I checked, there was not a damn thing in common about the wealth.
Haiti is the site of the first and only successful slave revolution in history. Haitians won their independence from France in 1804 and immediately abolished slavery, becoming the first place in the world to do so. It was also the first state to outlaw racism in its constitution. Haiti was a beacon of light for the world, and it was punished for it. It was punished over and over again by France, by the US, through a series of coups, invasions, occupations, assassinations, through relentless meddling and crushing debt. They were determined that this beacon of freedom would be extinguished because it presented a bold challenge to the dread logic of capital and empire. But the Haitian people kept fighting through. Theirs is a light that never goes out. And so, it's still being punished. The meddling goes on. If Haiti is a mess, and it is, then Europe and the US are to blame. If we want to support the Haitian people, and we should, we'll stand up to the US, the world's bully, tell them to get out of Haiti and get out of it ourselves.
When I was a young man growing up in New York City, I refused to pledge allegiance to the flag. Of course, I was sent to the principal's office, and he asked me, "Why don't you want to pledge allegiance? Everybody does." I said, "Everybody once believed the earth was flat, but that doesn't make it so." I explained that America owed everything it has to other cultures and other nations, and that I would rather pledge allegiance to the earth and everyone on it. Needless to say, it wasn't long before I left school entirely, and I set up a lab in my bedroom. There I began to learn about science and nature. I realized then that the universe is governed by laws, and that the human being, along with society itself, was not exempt from these laws. Then came the crash of 1929, which began what we now call the Great Depression. I found it difficult to understand why millions were out of work, homeless, starving, while all the factories were sitting there. The resources were unchanged. It was then that I realized that the rules of the economic game were inherently invalid. Shortly after came World War II, where various nations took turns systematically destroying each other. I later calculated that all the destruction and wasted resources spent on that war could have easily provided for every human need on the planet. Since that time, I have watched humanity set the stage for its own extinction. I have watched as the precious finite resources are perpetually wasted and destroyed in the name of profit and free markets. I have watched the social values of society be reduced into a base artificiality of materialism and mindless consumption. And I have watched as the monetary powers control the political structure of supposedly free societies. I'm 94 years old now, and I'm afraid my disposition is the same as it was 75 years ago. This shit's got to go.